Okay, everybody, welcome to our webinar today. Today we have Kaycee will be kicking us off. Kaycee is our CEO and founder of Promethium, and he has a special guest today. Special guest today that he'll introduce. So without further ado, let me hand over to Kaycee to get us started. Kaycee, let me stop sharing so you can start sharing. And for everyone, this session is being recorded, so if you want to share it with your friends, family, acquaintances, we'll be sending out the link after the session as well. So, and if you want to ask any questions, you can ask in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go or at the end in Q&A. Kaycee, over to you.
All right. Hey, thank you, Brent. Everyone, my name is Kaycee, I'm CEO and founder of Promethium, and I'm super excited here today to talk about the potential of a data fabric, and especially how it helps with getting answers to the business much faster when you have a lot of different data silos. And I'm super excited today to be joined by our fellow guest, not cadet. I'm pretty sure he didn't go to military school. Our fellow guest, Reto Matter, SVP of Data Strategies and Engineering at HealthEquity. Hello, Reto.
Pleasure being here. Thank you.
All right. So the problem that we want to solve at Promethium, that we see a lot of customers having big challenges, is, look, you got to have more and more data. You got to have more and more data sources. Very few times we'll actually walk into a company and they tell us, I just have one database, or I just have one data source. It doesn't happen. And so what we see all the time is people trying to get answers from multiple different systems. You're having to do complex ETL. And unfortunately, the folks that know how to do this are your awesome data engineers. And I haven't seen one company that told me I've got too many data engineers. That's never happened before. And so you kind of have a supply issue, a few data engineers and complex ETL, a lot of data, which means you're not able to get answers fast to business quickly enough, right? So this is where Promethium comes in, where we offer a solution where, guess what? You can actually get answers without having to move the data, without complex ETL, and even without coding. And so the result of that is your data engineering resources can actually scale a lot more. And that means faster answers to the business. So that's something that we're very proud of to be able to do at Promethium. And we're very happy and honored and flattered that the industry are saying great things about us. We were recently named Best New Product by CDO Magazine, as well as other awards and accolades. So thank you to everyone there. And so with that, I'm going to kick it off and introduce Reto, who has been in this space for a long time. This guy is, don't let the title fool you, because he actually is still very technical and knows what he's talking about. And, I was really happy to connect with Reto. I think I stalked him on LinkedIn for about 3 years or so. And so he's seen the journey of Promethium. I think our first version, when I showed him, he's like, get out of here, don't bother me. And over time, we started making more progress. And then when he landed at HealthEquity, I think that's when the needs and our capabilities finally aligned. And we're so super happy to be working with Reto and to be able to help him out with some of his data challenges. So Reto, with that, over to you to introduce HealthEquity and your team.
Well, thanks, Kaycee. Thanks for the nice introduction. And yes, I believe we crossed multiple times in our lives, right? And at one point in time, it was just a pipe dream or a virtual idea which you broadcasted there, and it's like, oh, it's interesting, but the guy must be smoking. And then years later, actually, he put all his engineering talent to work, and here we are. Anyhow, HealthEquity, most of you guys probably know us one way or another, right? So we work in this intersection of health and wealth. So in other words, we're highly regulated from an industry perspective. And we're just short of celebrating our 20th anniversary. Mid-sized company, about 3,500 employees. We grew through organically and through acquisitions. So our data stack, by no surprise, is a good combination of everything which you have out there in the marketplace. As of today, 30 million accounts under management. Oh, by the way, many of you probably have us in your wallet without realizing it. If you have a commuter card, from the WageWork days, right? It's like a Clipper card here in the Bay Area. That would be one of our products. Or if you're managing your health savings account or your flex spendings account, there'll be some product out of our portfolio. 100,000 companies are working with us, and with that, of course, we have all of the data traffic that comes. and all of the stack challenges which come with it. Next slide, please. So as of today, we're looking at, so this is a very simplified footprint of what we're really dealing with. Kaycee saw the original, right? I was like, well, we can't really show that because it's more it's more spaghetti than one has appetite for. But so we have two major data warehouses, one on the cloud and one on-prem, 16 plus minus data marts, right? More reporting solutions that I ever want to mention to anybody. But yes, I have seen worse. What I'm showing you here is not like out of the ordinary. It's typical for a company of its age, size, and growth pattern, right? Multiple ERP, CRM systems. Again, every integration tool in the book, plus homegrown ones. Databases, if you can think of a big name, I'm sure we have it, right? And again, we have to integrate everybody inside and outside of the company. And we're working on a new lake, and we're working on a migration to cloud. So lots going on, and most of all, everything is in a flux, in a constant state of flux, right? We don't have a static situation. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and Reto, I mean, it's kind of interesting because, well, number one, you're not alone, my friend. A lot of customers we see, especially the enterprise, this is the reality, right? I think, you know, multiple clouds, you know, is one thing that we're seeing a lot of.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because of the products you guys have. You're sort of in that intersection, right, of finance and healthcare. So security's got to be also kind of a big thing, and data access and privacy and controls got to be important to you guys.
That's an understatement. Security is in the center, in the middle, and the left, right? Everything which we do goes through a security control at any point in time. And it's our number one focus point for any new implementation which we take on. Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, if you think of that footprint in terms of data, and now you take an analyst hat on, right? And I'm sure many of you guys here in the audience at one point in time in your life, you were an analyst, right? I know Kaycee was. I was. I ran my own consulting company, and you know, we did projects for the teas and coffee houses of this world or the airlines of this world. And there's all these questions which come up, like, what is the participation by channel of my members, right? And should we shift our marketing dollars accordingly, and whatnot? And so the problem which we're facing at HealthEquity is, and again, this is probably true for every company I've been with over my last 30 years, where do I find my data? Where is it, right? So in our case, we have a plethora and sometimes multiple of the same in different locations, given how we grow or grow. And with that, it's like, just help me understand where I can find my data. Big challenge. Once I actually overcome that, it's like, how do I get to it? Right? Because maybe that data is not in a data warehouse. Maybe I have to go and pull that data. So you go through all these security hurdles, which you have to overcome naturally, right? For good reasons. So we have an access issue with that, and just a complexity issue. But more so, there's this convergence in our space of, I have a team of folks who really focus business-centric, right? So we have analysts for operations, we have analysts for marketing, we have analysts for every department within the company, and they're deep in the subject matter area. And then we have folks who schlep, right? Like my team, we're schlepping data, we're just making data available. And there's a lack between the two teams of understanding each other's domains, right? So as of late, you see this new terminology coming up of the analytical engineering discipline. There's some other products, if your data is being persisted, which starts to enable that. If your data is not persisted and being disseminated, like in our case, so how do you bridge that solution? It's a massive gap. And well, to bridge that gap, you waste time, right? Status quo, you build a pipeline, you schlep that data, and before you know it, it takes quite a bit of time for doing a good turnaround. And in the moment you provide the insights, most likely somebody will say from the stakeholder side, that's not what I wanted, or could you add on this, and what about that, and so forth. Yeah, look, we do weekly release cycles, so we're actually quite aggressive in terms of our push to production. We're pushing, once a week at the moment. We're trying to go twice a week, and that's still way too slow for an analyst to get enabled. So because I truly believe we need to be enabling experimentation on the data, so that if I have my scientist hat or my analyst hat, I can just go and try, throw away, try it again. Sometimes it takes 10 approaches before I find one that's actually really sticking and has value. And once it has value, we can worry about how we want to persist that data and how we want to make this in a persistent pipeline. So there's an underlying notion of slow. And if you have an underlying notion of slow, there's a overlying notion of cost, right? These are all the common things which we see right now, which I see at HealthEquity and which I've seen at every other company I've ever worked for before.
Yeah, thank you for that, Reto. And I think this is where at Promethium, we see a lot of customers facing this struggle. And so we want to actually challenge this standard, convention that people have where, you do have to cobble together multiple tools. You do have to file service tickets, wait for a different person to use a different tool in a different certain process, move the data, and wait for the complex ETLs. And oftentimes, again, as Reto said, you get to the end and someone says, well, it's kind of not what I'm looking for. Or, well, I didn't give you all my requirements. Could you do this instead? And you're going back and forth. And so you're spending more time doing that than actually taking actions on your data and on the analytics. And so this is something that we see companies struggling with. And so, when we got started the conversations with HealthEquity, it was really around, hey, how do we actually, significantly boost the productivity of the data team at HealthEquity? What if it's, having one single platform where all these capabilities are there to discover the data, to figure out what's inside, to figure out how to access it in a secure manner, and figure out how to build super quickly so that you're not keeping people waiting for weeks, days, weeks, or even months. So that way the iteration can actually happen. And so I think that's where things got really exciting, when we started talking with Reto and team, is to be able to show that, hey, there is a method, right, with our solution, which we call the data navigation system, where we can enable the data team and even the business team, because this is a no-code solution, to be able to have the ability to do self-service and turn answers around quickly, while providing the depth and the sophistication of tools that's needed for even advanced analytics work that's needed to be done. So that's where we were super excited, and we saw that there was a good fit in terms of Promethium and HealthEquity. So with that, what we want to do is kind of show you a little bit about what we're talking about, because this, I think one of the notions that's come up recently is this term called data fabric. And it's really something that we think embodies Promethium very, very well, because it shows the underlying flexibility as well as the universal connectivity that we have to all the different data sources, but then being able to do it in a way that's virtual. And so that way you're not having to build physical pipelines every single time, which are brittle, which are complex to maintain, and so forth. And so this is the aspect of the data fabric that we want to show, and we're really excited to showcase some of the new capabilities that companies like HealthEquity, innovative companies like these guys, can actually take advantage of. So with that, Reto, anything else you'd like to add before I actually get fingers on keyboard and do some demo action?
I'm excited to see the latest version. So always.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen. All righty. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, super. So the first thing about Promethium is that you can actually connect to over 200 different data sources. So RDBMS, S3, data lakes, SaaS applications like Salesforce, etc., structured, unstructured data. That's the nice part, is that you can actually do all that. And we only move the metadata, so it's very secure, it's very fast. You're not waiting for weeks or months to actually load data in. That's one of our advantages. And you actually get a global view of every table, every file, every query, every view available for search, all within a single interface. So for example, if I want to look for something called weather, I can search through it and it'll find it for me, right? 14 results across multiple different sources. And I have the ability to search by things that people have endorsed, or maybe my team, like my data stewards, are warning against me. And so it allows me to very quickly narrow down something. And once I do have it, I can drill in. I can see, are there tags that are created? I can actually do a preview and see the sample values, and I can go up to many rows to actually make sure that I'm satisfied with seeing sample values. And the nice part about this is there's nothing persistent. We didn't have to move the data, but you can actually see all the different dimensions of the data, right? From the actual column names to the tags that people have, to the sample values. You can see, if there's any comments that people have in the endorsement. So it makes it super easy for you to find something from a data perspective. Now, that actually is one of the parts that, the health equity team would like, is kind of the global discovery that we have of being able to find everything in one place. But the next part, right, was being able to very quickly build and answer and iterate very quickly in a no-code manner. Right? So let's take a look at how that would look like. And Reto, I'm going to put my old analyst hat back on, and Reto is my boss, and let's say he's got a question for me, and so he emails me a question, and he wants to know something about revenue, right? He wants to know something like, what is the revenue, subscription, and because Reto is a difficult customer, he's not going to end it at that. He's actually going to make it tough for me, right? Between 8 and 13. By plan, by term, and just for fun, he's going to give me a date range, right? From 2015 to 2018, right? So Reto's gonna ask me this question, and he's going to ask me to build this question. And if this question, hasn't been built before, meaning the data set hasn't been built, the ETL has not been pulled before, I got to build it from scratch, right? This is true ad hoc at its best. This is not going into Tableau and just refreshing a dashboard. And so the nice part about Promethium is we can actually automatically help you do that with our native intelligence to understand the data you have globally. And so if you trust us, one of the cool things is we'll automatically discover the data and figure out, based on the logic of the question that you have, how to actually put it together. So what's kind of cool here is, again, the data set didn't exist. They were actually in separate tables, but we were able to discover that you needed this table from Oracle. You needed to do a join with this table in MySQL. You needed the filter, right, by date from 2015, 2018, and then the filter for revenue, right, between 8 and 13, and then the group by from plan and term. So it's, without having to do any complex SQL, complex discovery, data wrangling, or ETL, Promethium was actually able to automatically figure that out all for you and automatically write the SQL statement for you so that you didn't have to do it. Now, fair warning, I was not, it's been a while since I've had to do this manually. And I think the last time I tried to do this, it probably took me way longer than I care to admit in a publicly recorded a webinar. But you can see how quickly Promethium did something like this, and everything we have here, right? It's actually editable. So if you said, hey, I didn't want to inner join, I actually want a left outer, you can go ahead and do that or change things. So it allows the analysts to be really agile in terms of being able to manipulate things live as we see. So that way you can actually go ahead and make any changes if you want, or change if you want to do a different group by, you can do that, or you want to go ahead and say, hey, let me come back later and make different changes here. You can also do that as well. And so from here, you can go ahead and then build out the visualization, right? So very quickly, this is more meant as a way to validate, right? We're not trying to say, hey, we want to create prettier charts in Tableau, but maybe I can just quickly validate this and say, hey, does this look right? And I can give this to Reto to take a look at later on and say, very quickly, Reto, do you think I'm on the right path, right? And so, what we do from here is we actually.
So being your boss, I have to interrupt you, right? And this is just the ultimate test here for the moment, right?
Yes.
Okay, I like how you approach this, and it's fantastic. But of course, a key question for you would be: so what if my data doesn't have these tags where I can just simply go and yank in what is the revenue by blah blah blah? What's my stopgap solution here?
Well, if you didn't have this, you would have to manually, first of all, figure out who in the organization would even know this. And secondly, do they have access to the data, which they probably don't. They have to go find another person, and then they would have to go do complex ETL, move everything into a single data warehouse, do complex transformation, manually write the query, probably make a lot of manual mistakes while they're doing this, and then file another service ticket for someone to actually build out the visualization, by which time you probably waited a few weeks and you're not all that happy, right? So something like Promethium, we're able to use our NLP and our global discovery capabilities, as well as our machine learning capabilities, to understand all the capabilities within your data, the potential joins, potential relationships, and then very quickly put this together. And it gets smarter over time, right, as more and more people use it. And so that kind of feeds the AI part of our solution to kind of recommend much more accurate answers for you. Now, once we build this, we actually have the ability to actually, build much more in-depth answers. And so I can actually take this, for example, and I can say, hey, I'm going to publish this into what we call an answer, right? And so once I do the publishing into the answer, Promethium allows you to actually create a much more robust view of this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and it's going to run. And once I go ahead and do that, one of the things that's cool is if you come to the answers page of Promethium, right, you will actually see it automatically generating a couple things for you. Number one is the narration. So, sometimes what you find is not everyone can look at the chart and come to the same conclusion. And that is very common in organizations. And so what we try to do is we try to explain the chart in English, right, automatically. For the executives, and say, hey, this is what this chart is actually measuring, right? This is the distribution, the most common values here, averages, and so forth. And if you want to get more details, right, we have the ability to do stories where we can also explain, things like, which one is more popular, et cetera. And so these type of insights really help people get more color, right, into the solution itself. And so in addition to showing Reto where the data came from, how I put it together, the visualization, we also accompany that with narration and storytelling. So Reto, does that look good?
No, I mean, look, this is huge. And just to share with the audience, at one point in time when I run my consulting company, we had this customer which invented the most popular mobile device in the world, right? And between meeting preparation and driving down to the valley to actually pitch to the CFO back then, of course, we're two on a laptop, one driving, shouting back and forth on how we actually interpreted the results which we had on our latest learnings, right? Updates to PowerPoint, then run by a Kinko's, do the printout, and still go into the presentation, right? So having something like that would have been quite nice.
So one of the cool things is, so we actually did all of this without moving data, right? If you guys saw earlier that we actually, we were able to do a federated query, right,
Kaycee?
between two different
Sorry,
data
Kaycee?
sources. Yes.
Yeah, just interrupt for 1 second because it's a great segue and you mentioned it. There's a question from the audience, and you you just said it in your opening line there. How does it work with data from two different data sources? Questions from Monica.
Yes. Well, it works by Promethium actually employing data virtualization techniques, right? So we actually leverage Presto, Apache Presto as the underlying engine. So that way we can actually do federated queries without having to move data into Promethium. And so that allows us to be able to do joins across different data sources. And so you actually have a single virtual view, but you're able to do a query without having to physically move and aggregate the data. As you can see here, we did just that. There's no data moved into Promethium whatsoever. These tables and this data stayed exactly where they were. So once we have that, so while data virtualization is great, right? And I'm a big fan of it. The reality is, once Reto sees this, he might say, hey, this is great. I want to make an operational report, right? Which means I want to have a schedule. I want to have it run every single day. Well, look, at that point, you may not want to do data virtualization every single time to do that, right? There, laws of physics do apply. And so at that point, you might say, hey, maybe I want to push this into my operational data warehouse, right? Something like Snowflake, for example, is super common. So Promethium actually allows you to actually take that answer that we just created, right? Which we call a data map. And you can actually then, here's the results of data map. You can actually publish that to any destination. So basically any source, any data source that Promethium has connected into, as we showed you earlier, right? You actually can, not only are we getting metadata and we connect them to do queries, but they can also become destinations for us to publish answers back into for operational dashboarding, right? So when I'm here, right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this again just to verify, make sure everything is okay, that it runs. And so, yep, everything looks okay. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to go ahead and add destination. Okay. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, hey, why don't I push this into Snowflake? Right. And again, I could have selected any of the other ones. And I'm going to go ahead and say publish. Now, just to prove to you, this is not staged. Here's my Snowflake environment. I have no tables in there. Okay, clean, fresh environment. So I'm going to go ahead and publish, and this is going to create the table in Snowflake. That is the aggregated result. So we're not going to have to move all the data from two tables because you don't care about that. You actually just want the result there, right? And so you go ahead and it's going to create this this for us now. And give it a minute to run. Okay, it says it's done. And look at that. It's actually here now. So it actually showed up here now, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and say, great, this is done. And from here, I can either schedule, right, operationally, how often I want this to happen, because I don't want to do it all the time. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and run, let's write the data, right? So that way we can show that it's actually real. So it's going to go ahead and do this query, and it's actually going to write this data and publish this all now into Snowflake, so I can now grab the data from Snowflake and go. Ooh, the risks of doing a live query. Oh, look at that. Okay, 565 rows loaded in 11 seconds, right? Now, if I come in here into Snowflake, 565 rows, right? So now this data is instantly available in Snowflake for you to do whatever you wish to do, right? You can check it out, load it, do all the cool things that you normally want to do. And the cool thing about this is, again, we were able to do this without actually having to move any data whatsoever, right? There was no code that we had to write. No one had to do anything complex. Everything was all done in very, very quick manner. You can actually see the answers very quickly. And here's the other cool thing that you can actually do is that, we actually give you the ability to switch between the federated query, which Promethium generated, and the actual pipeline table that's in Snowflake. So if you don't want to do the federated query, you don't have to, right? So right now it's going to pull the data from Snowflake. So for example, if I were to run this, it'll go ahead and run it. And so I actually have a choice, and this is actually very important because you can now trade off between costs, right? And cost and performance between what you want to be able to do. Right, and so I was able to, run this to about 4 seconds. And again, I can go into Snowflake and I can see, for example, right, my history, and I can go ahead and see, this one was actually run, it took 77 milliseconds, right, pretty fast. And I can switch, right? So I can say, hey, why don't I go ahead and do this in my federated view now? So that's kind of cool, right? You don't have to always use Promethium state of virtualization if you don't want to, because once you actually do that publishing, you can go ahead and switch back and forth. Now, this is a small data set, so there's not a big difference, right? So you can actually, but bigger data sets, this is going to matter, right? When we're talking about billions of rows, as awesome as Presto is, there's sometimes where we have physical, data sets in different locations. You may not want to do a federated query, and so this just gives you the capability and freedom to be able to actually, switch between different views for different performance and cost implications. Reto, how was that? That was the first time you saw that, right?
Yeah, I might just rehire you as an analyst, Kaycee.
Look at that. I still haven't forgotten my chops.
Yeah, I think it's right in that cross section, right, as what I indicated between the what I call analytical engineering discipline, which is emerging in the market and addressing the needs from without having to move the data, and on top of it understanding metadata. I mean, for me that's massive. Also, how quickly then I can onboard a new member on the team and enable them and truly push the work towards the business stakeholders and not be the bottleneck in the process. For me, that's probably the number one thing which I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you mentioned onboarding new members. One of the things that people do really like about Promethium is that, as you notice, everything that's in Promethium that you create is all here in one location, right? You got the dashboard, you got the query, you got the SQL, you got the narration. We tell you where the data actually comes from, where to find it. And so from a knowledge perspective, what we find over and over again with customers is it's a great way to onboard new people, right? Because, unfortunately, there is going to be churn and change in a lot of organizations, but if new people can come on very quickly and you have a list of answers, a list of questions that or your organization has already created, then very quickly your team can actually come and find what they're looking for, see how popular it was, see who requested it, see how it was actually built, and all that logic is there and it's shareable. So that's the cool thing, is the work that's done. We have customers, for example, they'll realize, hey, there's actually some good bodies of work created by other people. Instead of recreating it, sometimes I could just take from that library, right, of all the different answers and queries and build a new one. So these are other capabilities from Promethium that, again, shows the flexibility of kind of what happens when you have a single data fabric to connect to all the different sources that you have.
Yeah, and I think I shared this with you the other day, right, where at this intersection where you currently have this product, I believe you're a few steps away from becoming Scotty beam me up, right? And if you put this into context where I can start interacting with the system saying, hey, I need this particular answer on data, and Promethium will tell me, say, oh, sorry, that data is not available, or this is the best possible answer which I can find giving the definition which you provided, and so forth. So this becomes a very, very interactive. So I know I'm jumping ahead here of the curve of what I believe could be.
Hey, that's the next webinar, Reto. Come on, man.
That's next week, right? That's your next product release. But no, so again, this is just for me to share I think there's a massive amount of unlock which you can achieve with a fabric like the one which you're providing here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're pretty excited, and we've been getting a lot of great pressing, a lot of great response from customers. So one of the things that we see time and time again is CDOs such as yourself are constantly being asked by their bosses to get answers to the business much faster. And unfortunately, no one is actually giving you less data and giving you less data sources and making it easier by putting it in one location. And so, Promethium is built, specifically so, hey, your data can be as distributed as you want, but here's a quick way to do it without having to compromise the security, but actually making it easy and fun. Hopefully, you guys saw that. It was kind of a fun experience. I thought it was kind of cool. And so a lot of our customers actually have a lot of fun with this and really customize kind of what they're trying to do. So yeah, with that, I'm super happy to announce the new release of our data pipelining capabilities, and I'll open it up to see if anyone has any questions.
Hey, Kaycee, we do. Let me just start unmuting everyone so they can allow to talk. There's a few questions. Let me start with Bill Nelson. Bill, you asked a question about security. Do you want to ask live? You should be able to talk with unmuting yourself now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wondering, Kaycee, if you could elaborate a little bit on security. Does Promethium have like its own security layer, or does it rely on the security of the sources, or both?
Yeah, the short answer is both, Bill. So we can take the existing security you have, role-based access, SSO, LDAP integration, And we also have our own as well. So you can actually do a couple things in terms of creating unique roles and privileges by user, by role, by topics of questions if you want. So and it's very customizable, right? It's very, very fine grained. And then from there, you can also do things like role level and row level, different access, encryption, and masking. So that way it's really built for the enterprise. It's the only way I could get past a guy like Reto, right? He wouldn't let me pass the gate if we weren't able to demonstrate as a secure solution.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Brett, any other questions?
Apologies, Kaycee, I was talking on mute. Yes, there's a question from Francisco. That was a great question. Francisco asked a little while back during the demo, I need to create a new field with a formula using existing fields.
Yes, that is actually capable. You can actually do that with our product. So in our visual data prep, when you're building out the answers and you're selecting the table and selecting the columns, we actually allow you to do wrangling, also allow you to do casting, and so you can actually also create new formulas, create new columns, create one with concatenate columns, all the things that people are used to doing in the normal data prep process. That is actually available in Promethium, both as no code, 100% UI driven, as well as for the power users, right? You get your SQL editor to do whatever it is that you like to do. So all those capabilities are still available in Promethium.
And Francisco, if you have any follow-up questions, you're free to unmute yourself and ask. Kaycee, there's another question from Monica, and this is one of your favorite topics. I know how much you love this, NLP, natural language processing. So she asked a great question. Monica's asking, how long does it take to build the corpus for NLP, or do you use any existing NLP platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say the approach we take is a little bit different than most. I think most people are used to, let's throw huge corpuses, at this, huge libraries, and let's train the heck out of it for 18 months. And then at the end of 18 months, you realize no one's really going to use it. And that's something that we just saw time and time again from. We actually almost went down that path. We decided not to. So short answer is, we actually have the ability to incorporate different NLP libraries, right? So one of the things that makes Promethium is the extensibility aspect, where you can take a specific NLP library from a specific vertical or specific language, or a combination of both. So that way you can actually have relevant NLP terms that's specific to that organization, that business unit, in that country, in that particular vertical. The second is, so that's actually fast, right? You can plug that in and boom, you get that corpus immediately. The second part is, rather than waiting and training of umpteenth months to actually get that through, Promethium actually starts off by kind of exposing our data catalog capabilities with global discovery, auto tagging, and also when we also have the ability to actually take in existing queries, for example, which tells us about the joins that already exist, the relationships, and then from there we can actually infer similar types of relationships. And then lastly, as people use the data, right, as how often do they search for it, how often do they click on it, how well do they rate and review on it, it's kind of like a complete loop, right? All these things actually drive the intelligence for Promethium to get smarter and better, right? So usage, we're big fans of usage-driven intelligence, right? In terms of how it's actually being used, who's using it, how frequently, ratings and reviews, because we feel like that ultimately is the best indication of accuracy, as opposed to, standard corpuses that people throw out and hope for the best after spending a lot of time. And oftentimes those projects usually aren't that successful, right, from what we found. So that's the approach that we take. And so the short answer, sorry, to your question, Monica, is it actually happens pretty quickly, because as we connect, and then as we actually load the SQL queries as well, and as you start asking the questions and people start interacting with the questions, This actually happens in real time, and very quickly, the ratings and reviews will actually adjust the suggestions by Promethium in real time. And anything that you don't like, you edit very quickly, right? We update the score, as you can see.
Okay, Kaycee, we have a question from Antonio. Antonio's
Yes.
question is, what skills or experience should the Promethium user have?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's two types of users, or three, maybe three now, that you can have within Promethium. I would say one is, what we call a power user, and these are probably your data engineers that you guys have today. So these guys are used to doing ETL. They probably are domain experts, right? They know kind of where some of the data is, and I think that's still useful because they get context, right? And then the second is what we call our explorer persona, and these are probably the data analysts. These guys do a lot more SQL. They're much closer to the business, and so they do create visualization and so forth. And I think what Promethium makes it super easy, but I think having that context, having that background, makes it much easier for them to build relevant answers quickly. And then the last one is kind of our casual user or business user persona, and you really don't need much skill for that one. I think it's if you know how to use Google. You know how to use search engine, you can probably be our business user because that's really all you need to do is search, look for existing questions and answers, or create a new one, and then consume it. See the answer, see the visualization someone's built, see the narration that Promethium automatically generated for you, and then rate and review or message back the person who built it for you. So that base is really kind of geared for the business users, and we don't require any special knowledge for those folks to come on board.
Okay, Kaycee, we also have a question from Alicia. Alicia, I hope I pronounced it right. I apologize if I've got it wrong. It's my Australian accent, I'll blame it on that. Is it possible to create a data transformation that is specific to a particular data source?
Can you elaborate, Alicia?
Sure.
Yeah,
so I'm building on Francisco's question about creating new fields with existing fields and refining that a bit. So if a field definition is unique to a particular data source, meaning that different fields would need to be combined in order to get the same value that is essentially the same as a different data source, is that possible to realize that distinction?
Yes. So one is the new fields that you create could be either isolated to a specific data source, or it could be isolated to a specific question, which could be across multiple data sources. And so you also have this notion of formula building, right? So I can actually create a new field, which is really a formula, which could actually take fields from multiple sources, and that becomes a formula that becomes reusable later on. So for example, one popular thing is you probably don't want 10 definitions of gross margin or churn in your organization. And oftentimes that does require data from multiple tables to calculate. And so once you actually have that, you can actually apply that formula across multiple questions or multiple fields as well. And so the reusability is there.
Did that answer the question, Alicia?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great, thank you for asking. Okay, Kaycee, we have a question from Anna. The question is, it's a long one, so strap in. How does Promethium deal with redundant and/or conflicting data from multiple sources? For example, a great one, because we work with Salesforce very well. So for example, Salesforce says client address is 1 Main Street and sales page says this client is at 20 Main Street. In other words, can it assist with data mastering?
I understand your question, and this is one of the things that probably drives most analysts nuts, Anna. So the short answer is we're not an MDM solution, right? So we're not going to merge and say this is the right record. We do work with other MDM solutions. However, we surface that for you. And I think one of the things that makes it unique is if you start seeing kind of that data set being used a lot more, or you start seeing ratings and reviews and comments from people, those are the things that kind of help people determine whether or not they like it or not. And then there are endorsement flags and warning flags that data stewards or other members of the organization with privilege can actually set. So someone can actually say, hey, don't trust the address on 20 Main Street, right? And so that annotation will always be there. And so you can then do searches, as well as you can actually use annotations and endorsements as a parameter. So when I'm doing the automatic generation of the answer, I could actually make endorsements as one of the criteria and say, yeah, I don't want you to just find everything with address. I only want you to select the ones that have been endorsed. And so that actually kind of gives you the nice safe bumper rails. Of course, you can remove that, right? So we actually, the solution is very flexible. So that way, depending on your level of depth and your level of comfort with the data, you can say, hey, I'm okay. Give me 50 messy results, right? Because I'll quickly go through them and find the 2 that I want. Or if the audience is not someone that's not as sophisticated, they really might want to just start with, give me 2 possible outcomes. So that's something that we do in our solution.
Kaycee, we have, oh no, wait, we've got another question. I was about to say we've exhausted the questions, but Antonio came in with a last minute question. So thank you, Antonio. He's saying, his question is, as part of data security, questions and answers can be private and only that user or group of users can consult them. So basically the question is, can we limit the access to questions and answers?
Yes. So you can actually limit them on a couple of different levels. Number one is obviously, role-based access. And so user-based access, you can actually say, hey, only this user can see this, or these users can see this, or only these roles can see it, right? Maybe I have a user group called executives, or a user group called, data admins. Only these guys can actually see it. And you can actually also create topics. So you can say, hey, I'm working on a project that happens to be a project where I do need participation from folks from different teams, but I can selectively pick those members. So I can say, hey, only people who are members of this topic or this project can actually see them. So that's the level of flexibility that we provide for access to different questions and answers.
That was the last of our questions. Reto, do you have any questions for Kaycee? Seems like you should put him on the hot seat for a minute. You have to do a lot of questions.
No, there's really no question on my side. It's interesting to listening to the questions coming from the audience, right? Because of course they're a reflection of what I've just been going through for the last 3-4 months that we've been evaluating and weighing our options, no-goes and whatnot. And many of the same topics came up as I've been through this process. And just for the audience to understand, we are just going through the installation with Promethium. So we're like all little kids in a candy store right now, waiting for the switch to go on and enable our partners to really go gang-ho and go crazy and have fun with this product. So yeah, I'm sitting on needles. I'm super excited, and I'm looking forward to taking on the next steps here.
I have a question for Reto, and I'm going to put him on the spot. Reto, he's been around the block. He knows all the tricks. He knows all the products out there, what they really do, what they claim to do. I guess, Reto, my question is like, what was the alternative? What would have been the alternative? Right? If it wasn't Promethium, what would you guys have done?
Yeah, so great question, right? And I have to like repause my thoughts here for a moment. So I don't think there's this one tool that does it all, right? And I think we're all in agreement here. But I do think there is definitely this intersection of enabling upfront, and that's where you guys come in, right? So it's like, how do I read through my jungle and give a tool to the analyst without having to get involved? So you're in this early on enablement piece. I strongly believe there's still a need for either a cloud data warehouse or a combination with a lake. Why? Because there's data which is what I call out of reach, right? Promethium will not be able to go and reach every data because maybe the data source is slow, right? It cannot handle another load and we have to go through a massive batch export, or it comes from a third-party vendor and you know what, they only provide you a certain way of handling that data and so forth, right? There's cases where you still need to go and persist the old-fashioned way, and that's all right. So, but I'm looking for this combination where I can play with, early enablement, if I have my data persisted, to also, again, in this analytical engineering space, tools like dbt come to mind, right? Where I can rapidly model without having to worry about engineering. So I think these combination of tool sets allow any enterprise to move forward fast. Have I seen anybody, coming back to your original question, have I seen anybody that directly competes with you guys? I mean, yes, there's companies which claim to have fabrics out there, right? Data fabrics. You're not the only one which uses that in its marketing spiel. I looked at 3 or 4 different contenders. And typically what you see is other fabric players that come in from the knowledge graph spaces, okay? Which is the most logical and kind of like, that kind of makes sense until you put your hands on it and then you realize there is not much there besides heavy duty engineering lifting, right? And I'm trying to get my engineers out of the lifting piece and focus on real problems to be solved. For example, like the MDM question that came up from the audience, right? So we have to go build a customer 360. We have to go build, a client 360. So these are the things where I'd rather have my smarts being focused on versus on how do I schlep and how do I enable. So I haven't seen many other players out there. To be honest, I have not seen anybody. I mean, you can go back in time when data virtualization came big, right? So about 10, 15 years ago, I implemented Denodo for a very, very large retailer here in the US. And that was very, very promising, right? Because it kind of was at the same edge as what you're providing, but it was by no means what we currently see.
No, thank you so much, Reto, for your time, for your participation. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we had a great time. And look forward to the next one.